What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Gary Numan, and we're returning to Telekon 1980. Thank you once again to Mr. Solo. And the next track, make sure I have this right, is it Sleep by Windows? Yes, Sleep by Windows, which is an interesting phrase. Like, it makes me, number one, think of being on an airplane where the outermost seat, or I suppose innermost, depending on which way you're defining that, but the seat closest to the edge of the airplane is typically a window seat, and those are often coveted because of the ability to see the earth and cities and the ocean from a great height. But of course, oftentimes you close the window, and many times that is because you'd like to sleep while you're flying. Now, of course, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with an airplane, and it might be sleeping by windows in a house. But it's an interesting thing because in the context of a residence, an apartment, or a house, sleeping by a window is perhaps less common because you are more exposed. Now, typically people have blinds or shutters or curtains, and thus the outside world cannot see the person sleeping there. But yes, I wonder in which of those two contexts it might be the case, or it might be conceptualized here. Even if it's one or the other specifically, I would imagine there might be some metaphor. Indeed, the previous song, clearly, and as people explained even beyond what I figured while listening on a first hearing, the autobiographical figurative meanings might be significant in that regard, both in terms of the concept of a window, which is a portal through which you can see something, and sometimes people talk about a window into your soul or into your heart or into your mind. And so in that regard, I'll try to be on the lookout, or catch what I can in terms of there being maybe some specific meaning. Now, sleeping, again, might not be literally sleeping, but not being alert or awake to all the phenomena happening around you. So yeah, it's an interesting title. There's a bit of a poetry to it, but I don't quite know what to make of it, either literally or figuratively, so I'll just catch what I can. This is Gary Numan from Telekon 1980, and it's Sleep by Windows.
Trees until you tear yourself apart. But I don't love you. No, I don't love you. Do you agree? Back to surveillance, open eyes and wash out tear. A silence is no exit and no one can save you here. I could talk about my program. Everything is white. I could specialize in beaches where nothing's ever right. But I don't love you. No, I don't love you. Do you dream? We are just sound, and we are just noise, and we are all here to lie. And we are just sound, and we are just noise, and we are all here to lie. Here to lie. Do you dream?
first, I'll comment on the very end. The way, even before it actually started changing the tempo, I noticed there was that shift where I think it was the snare went from like every second bar to like every bar. And so suddenly, even though you could still, if you were DJ, mix in time with another record without having to change the pitch on the other record, it already sort of changed the rhythmic and percussive feeling, and then it literally started to pitch up and get faster right at the end. So yeah, that was a really striking and notable feature. I will say, like, Numan not only has a very distinct style, but his actual synth work, like the literal keyboard chords and melodic progression, they're unique. Like, there's, now I've heard enough of his music where I could hear just like a 7 or 8 second snippet of one of his tunes, where a part where there's no vocals, and I feel like I would know pretty quickly that it's Numan. He just has a really interesting sound. It often sounds very sci-fi, very cosmic, and this is another one in that vein. And so, quite apart from his very distinct vocal performance, which, I've heard a little bit of variation, but a lot of it has that very mechanical, monotone type of sound, obviously very deliberately. But even apart from that, I think his music is very immediately recognizable as I've come to hear it now. Now, obviously, I've still listened to, I think, a pretty small slice of his overall catalog, but at least during the late 70s and very early 80s, and having heard a couple of his solo albums and hearing the Two-Way Army stuff, which admittedly, that had a bit more of a post-punk guitar edge to it, but yeah, he just has a really notable and identifiable sound, specifically in terms of his synth work. But okay, so lyrically, I mean, he starts talking about sleeping in different places, including at the park and so on. So now I'm like, I'm not in a plane anymore, and I'm thinking, okay, this is, whether we're metaphorically speaking or figuratively speaking, it sounds more terrestrial. And then there's the line about, we're just noise, we're just sound. And so suddenly I'm thinking, okay, so are we talking about, like, he's talking about robotic or artificial life that's distinct from a more feeling and comprehensive, like, biological type of life, but then, like, saying I don't love you, and sort of, I wondered if that's also in relation to not having emotions in the same way that regular or full humans do. But then what was it, like, I don't love you, do you agree? I didn't know if I heard that correctly, but that's amusing in itself. And then by the end, he is talking about sleeping by windows, but it's the person he's addressing, not the narrator himself or itself. So yeah, I really don't quite know what's happening here, even if I did catch a number of the lines, but it sounds like it might be more synthetic or, android type of themes, but again, maybe with some autobiographical metaphor at play. So yes, really interesting lines to the degree I caught them, very compelling synth work, and again, a percussive and rhythmic shift toward the end that was really surprising and very, arresting. So yeah, another cool tune, another one that is, as I said, the moment you hear it, it's Numan, and ultimately I think that's a very good thing. So yes, enjoying this album. I appreciate the insight and context that people have been providing. Thank you again to Mr. Solo for providing his work. Let me know what you think, and Luca and I will see you next time. Peace.